In tonight's Dateline Defense, foreign policy in the 2016 election. Republican presidential hopefuls continue to make their case for why they should become president. But in a field of 17 candidates, many have the same plan when it comes to Iraq and Syria, and it's all thanks to a former presidential nominee. Joining me to explain is retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He's a decorated combat veteran, author, PhD, and executive vice president of the Burke-McGregor Group. Doug, a Bloomberg article pointed out that a majority of the Republican presidential candidates have hired the same group of foreign policy experts to prep them for their campaign. The group, called the John Hay Initiative, is an offshoot of Mitt Romney's foreign policy team. Why are they all going to one source? That doesn't sound like a great idea.
Well, I tend to agree with you, except that in Washington, people who drink poison frequently go back to the poison well for more poison, and this is another example. Look, your viewers have heard of dialing for dollars.
Yes.
We have a lot of Republicans out there, not the top ones, by the way, but this broader field that's desperate for money. They're pitching for dollars. They're pitching for dollars from wealthy financial persons associated with the neocons who are backing people like Romney and obviously Jeb Bush, Rubio, and others.
That's why Jeb Bush went back to the same people that got us in trouble with Iraq that were consulting his brother. So I don't get it. I do and I don't, you know?
Yeah.
One candidate who's not using the John Hay Initiative is Donald Trump. He told Meet the Press that he watches military experts on TV to get a sense of things. What do you think of that?
Well, that's probably better than what his predecessors have done, which is listen almost uniformly to the wrong people.
Right.
Some of your viewers will remember Admiral Fallon, who was the Central Command commander. He was effectively ejected by the Bush administration because he said, look, we need to get out. Iran really isn't a threat, and we absolutely should not launch the surge. His views were not welcome, but Admiral Fallon's been very, very right. So I think Mr. Trump can't do any worse at this point. Let's hope that if he does get elected, and no one knows at this point whether or not that's even possible, but if he does, that he'll look a little further afield from where he's been focused in the past.
Well, I can't blame him for watching experts on TV since they're not knocking on his door. He's not in government. He doesn't have the benefit of hearing from admirals and generals. So, you know, you can't fault him for that.
Right.
He's honest. That's the problem. He's honest.
Yeah.
He says, without being filtered, he says, yeah, I watch TV experts. A big issue for the Republicans is fighting ISIS, but they all take a very hawkish view of the problem. Many of the options being discussed include more boots on the ground and a prolonged mission in Iraq and Syria. Is that the right approach?
Well, look, we talked earlier about the neocons,
right,
the people that are advising the so-called Republican candidates, and by the way, some of the people on the left as well.
Right.
They are going to find any excuse they can, frankly, to drag the United States Armed Forces, particularly the United States Army, back into the Middle East. That's really their agenda. Whether or not it makes any sense, whether or not anything is going to be accomplished is a secondary consideration. Their goal is to get us involved. And I think that's what people need to keep in mind. And I also think that's what's really hurting the Republican candidates. And if they keep it up, I think most people will walk away from them.
Got a good point. Let's switch gears to Russia, Doug. In recent months, top military officials have called Putin an existential threat to the U.S. Now, some reports indicate that the Pentagon could not maintain a long-term war with that country. How is it possible? Is this a money or management issue?
Your viewers need to understand that this tremendous surplus of military power that we had after Desert Storm in the 1990s has been systematically squandered over the last 20 years in a series of pointless, self-defeating interventions that have done nothing for our national security. So that surplus of military power we once had is now gone. So the truth is that if we had to fight the Russians today, no, we couldn't do it very effectively. In fact, this is one of the great dangers. Some of your viewers will remember that we built the conventional force structure so that we would not become dependent exclusively upon nuclear weapons. Right now, that conventional force structure, particularly the Army, secondarily the Air Force and the Navy, but preeminently the Army, is in ruins. There is no surplus. We could not fight, and we would be defeated on the ground in Eastern Europe if we had to fight today.
Russia has continued to exert its force in Ukraine and has upped its aggression toward the U.S. with flybys off the coast. Is Putin looking for a fight or just testing us?
I think Putin is simply poking us,
yeah,
reminding us that he's there, reminding us that he's not going to cooperate. I don't think there's any interest in a direct confrontation. And he is very incremental in the way he does business. He's moving slowly bits and pieces of Ukraine are disappearing every so many weeks. I think we're going to see more of this in the future, particularly since we're dismantling the Army and dramatically reducing the armed forces. We're keeping, by the way, lots of generals and admirals, still spending lots of money. We're just not getting much for it.
What a surprise. All right. Before you go, let's talk about China. They're going to be holding a parade in the next few weeks commemorating World War II and some other things in history. But for the first time in a long time, that parade is going to consist of military equipment, military might. What's China up to?
I think China has a very important agenda that we need to understand and not misinterpret. China has no offensive aims whatsoever. China right now internally, as we've pointed out in previous broadcasts, is in a lot of economic trouble. So we're seeing two things play out on this anniversary. Number one is a demonstration that the armed forces are loyal to the Communist Party and its ruling elite. And that's because large numbers of generals have been purged, frankly. And then secondly, a signal preeminently to Japan and secondarily to us not to challenge China right now simply because internally they have trouble, that they are powerful, they are strong, and they cannot be easily overcome. That's about it.
So China's basically paranoid. They're not looking to take on anybody. They just don't want us to take them on.
Very much so. And look, air-sea battle, all of the drum beating for war and potential confrontation in both the South China Sea and up near Korea, these things have had an effect in China. And the Chinese are very, very defensive-minded at this point. And that's really what this is about.
It's good to get your insight. Retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke Macgregor Group. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.